Very well, always some very interesting insights right there from BBC Money Daily. Let's continue with our business chat analysis right here. Ohoro, we are talking about the protectionist policies that are supposed to be, of course, protecting the local producers in a bid to increase the balances of trade across these other countries. And you are emphatic that even countries that started way back ago were once protectionist states in terms of how much they produce to the economy and, of course, how much they trade. Let's expand on that for a bit.
Yeah. By protectionist, I mean it's always locals first. So even where they might say, let's take Europe or America or even Asia, where they talk about they are a liberal commercial economy, they can use also non-tariff. A lot of them use what you call non-tariff barriers to keep others out. But especially when a country decides to industrialize, if there's a season there, it must protect its domestic industrial base until it's strong enough to compete internationally. That's what every single country does, from Japan to Asia to America. The question is that you can only do the protection if you are very focused in building that base. Now, but if you do protection, if you just protect your local economy just so that others don't benefit, but you do nothing to grow yourself, then that is what is very harmful. Okay.
If you were to rationalize, what would be the ratio of export and local production, and of course, what we feed to the export market?
As much as possible. They used to talk about comparative advantage, and a lot of things that we should be producing anyway. Like, there's no question we should be producing our own food. It's a strategic. It's a strategic imperative that we should at least be able to feed ourselves. Because especially now that we found out that global supply chains, especially combined with COVID, have pretty much told us if you don't, you can actually starve. And so that's a strategic sector which should never be dominated by a foreign supplier.
Sure.
But there's also a couple of others, and one of them I think is the whole notion of what is a fundamental industrial base you need, so that in the event that you are shut off from the rest of the world, are you able to produce at least a minimum level of value? And by that I mean everything from machinery to products to even service expertise. And part of, for example, this conversation about Juakali, do we have sufficient engineers, for example, here, who can now build this expressway we've just built?
Another one maybe to Turkana or wherever.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. In other words, okay, so you build the first one, so you allow the Chinese in. But then after that, you have become protectionist. You
procure
say,
locally.
To build the next one, yes, China will build the next one, but 50% of the engineers must be the ones that were taught from building this one.
Okay.
Then you see that's an enlightened policy around protectionism. But protectionism for its own sake is not the way to go.
Amazing. Let's talk about Tanzania for a while before we engage Ramogi on this one. And Ramogi, we hope you prepare for that. We lost to Tanzania in manufacturing last financial year. Are we at tipping point? And what do we need to do to get back up? Of course, we understand that there are some policies that affected that led Tanzania to become better. As we were closing down our economy, they were an open economy during the COVID pandemic. But right now, we have rested some of those COVID protocols. What do we need to do to get back our glory, so to speak?
I wouldn't worry too much, because as I said, Tanzania did not close down during COVID. It has a much bigger resource base. And it was inevitable that would happen. My concern is that Kenya has just the advantage of actually a much stronger private sector base. And so in that sense, catching up will not be an issue. More important is the reasons why Tanzania may keep succeeding. And if you look at some of the policies they put in place, are very strategically pro-investment, especially particular sectors. And they've called this, I call it the Magufuli principle, by the way, where they said the value addition out of their own resource base must be local. And I think something that has continued with this one. So I'll tell you, for example, now the president went to the US and signed these deals to do with gas. This is absolutely strategic, because with what happened with Ukraine, I don't know, it's amazing. You have to be very enlightened and strategic and aggressive. And that's what they've done.
William, I'll have you go on this one. Tanzania, what do we need to do to topple that their their win or the euphoric win on manufacturing in the previous financial year? William.
I think Tanzania is not our problem at all, never have been. I would be more worried if Somalia was growing at the rate Tanzania is growing with all that insecurity. Within the region, I think the growth of Tanzania is a win for us because an expanding economy means bigger market for us, and the other way around is also true. And so that wouldn't worry me. There's a question you had asked that I was burning to respond to, which is in what ratio are we to consider exports versus imports? And I love the way Uhuru answered it, that it's a matter of food must be prioritized. But I want to also add that we need to value add on our agricultural production in terms of what can we do locally before we export them, because we are taking a lot of primary goods out there. Additionally, COVID taught us that our healthcare system, we need to be self-resilient or self-sufficient in terms of medication, in terms of health equipment, in terms of everything that is needed within that ecosystem, so that should another COVID-19 come, we should be somewhere. But more importantly, we cannot have a balance of payment that is like 2/3 in favor of importers. No, that has to shift the other side, so that at least, at most, the imports should be around 1/3, and our exports 2/3. That would be awesome. That would be a good place to be.
Amazing. The 2/3 imports rule, I dare say. 2/3 imports and exports rule. William, I'll have you have a last word on this one. We were speaking earlier on, and your favorite news item was that a South African is buying Twitter for $5 billion USD. Is that your favorite business news of the week?
No, that's running still, but that was quite something. I mean, some gentleman who a few, like 10 years back, was nondescript is now buying Twitter for 5 trillion Kenya shillings. That's our budget plus change.
No.
I mean,
that's huge. I can imagine.
I wonder where we need to get as a country where we can empower our own people, industrialists, to be able to do that. But more importantly, of course, I'm also concerned about the issues to do with data. These guys are able to access the data of almost the whole world from his laptop. How is he using this data? And that's something that we need to really think about, the private sector having too much access to too much data. And it's not just him, it's Mark Zuckerberg as well, on the other hand, has millions of data, the good, the bad, and the ugly.
William, all right, good. I'm going to have Uhuru mention on what he has to say about his favorite business news of the week. 30 seconds, sir.
I mentioned just the banks and how they've expanded regionally. I also celebrate the fact that the top 4 banks in Kenya are now local banks. I know because you're like the frog in the warm water, we don't recognize an area of absolute success. And to us, and to me, I like to celebrate. I'd end on a positive note that clearly Kenya is a financial powerhouse as far as the banking sector is concerned.
Sure.
I just wish it would be like that in the industrial space too.
But then again, as you said, it has to show some impact in the Mwananchi's pocket.
Yes, on the ground.
Definitely. We have been speaking to Uhuru Ndoho and William Odembo-Ramogi, who are our regular weekly panelists right here at BizChat Weekly, where we analyze the top business stories that we just want to give you perspective on all of these things and those information that you may not have access to, because this is where you get the whole story. My name is Brian Jodotieno. Many thanks for your invaluable company. We do this again next week. Enjoy the rest of your viewing, and God bless.